Out here on the frontier, the land teaches a man the true meaning of hardship, its lessons written in the sweat of his brow and the weariness in his bones. For Bill, a once proud ranch hand with a heart heavy from misfortune, every sunrise brought a new trial. With a bankrupt ranch to his name and desperation clinging to him like dust on a boot, he found refuge in a moldy wagon hidden deep within the canyons of the American West. Beside him stood Roger, his faithful German shepherd, eyes gleaming with loyalty and courage that transcended the rugged terrain. Together, they sought solace from the unforgiving sun and the whispers of loss that echoed through the craggy rocks. But as Bill rummaged through the decaying remnants of the old wagon, something strange caught his eye. A loose board, warped with age and mystery. As he pried it free, an unexpected draft surged through the air, cool and chilling, despite the sweltering heat that clung to the canyon walls. It was as if the very earth sighed with secrets long buried, and Bill's heart raced as he unearthed a crumpled deed, the ink still legible, a title to a long-forgotten property worth $2 million. But with this newfound fortune came the unsettling knowledge of cold drafts that had no earthly source, and shadows that danced just beyond the periphery of his vision. What had he stumbled upon? Would this discovery lift him from the depths of despair or plunge him deeper into darkness? Before we delve into the heart of Bill's journey, we invite you to lean in closer. Have you ever found yourself facing a choice that could change everything? Keep your ears open, for the mysteries of the canyon are just beginning to unfold. The sun hung low over the jagged cliffs of the canyon, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters across the dry earth. Bill squinted against the fading light, the brim of his battered hat pulled low over his brow. "Well, ain't this a fine pickle?" he muttered to Roger, who stood at his side, ears perked and nose twitching, sniffing the crisp air that carried whispers of the past. The moldy wagon sat crookedly in the clearing, its weather-beaten wooden planks warped and splintered, like an old coot waiting for a good yarn to spin. "Guess it's either this or sleep under the stars, boy," Bill said, stepping closer to the dilapidated vehicle. He ran a calloused hand over the rusted hinges, the metallic tang mingling with the scent of damp earth. "Might as well make ourselves at home." Roger barked low, a sound that echoed off the canyon walls, and Bill felt a shiver run down his spine. It wasn't just the cool evening air that sent a chill through him, it was something else, something unnatural that clung to the shadows like a bad omen. "Come on, let's take a gander inside," he urged, nudging the door open with a gentle shove. It creaked ominously, the sound rattling through the silence like a ghostly sigh. The interior was dark and cramped, a stale scent of old wood and mildew hanging in the air. Bill stepped inside, feeling the temperature drop noticeably, as if an unseen specter had taken residence. He glanced down at Roger, who stood at the threshold, his keen eyes scanning the dark corners. "What is it, fella? Smelling trouble?" Roger's ears pricked up, and he stepped cautiously into the wagon, his nose twitching, his instincts on high alert. Bill chuckled to himself, trying to shake off the unease creeping up his spine. "You're just being a silly mutt," he murmured, but even he couldn't ignore the odd chill that settled around him. The remnants of someone's life lay scattered about, a few tattered blankets and a broken lantern that had seen better days. Bill rummaged through the refuse, the dim light of dusk filtering through the cracks of the wagon, casting eerie shadows that twisted on the walls. "Nothing but junk, just like I figured," he said, tossing aside a rusted tin can. Then he caught sight of something sticking out from beneath a loose floorboard, a hint of parchment barely visible. "Well, what in tarnation do we have here?" With a swift motion, he pried up the board, the old wood splintering under his hands. A gust of wind whipped through the wagon, colder than before, rustling the remains of the blankets and sending a shiver racing down Bill's spine. "This ain't right," he muttered, pushing aside the chill to focus on what lay hidden beneath. He pulled out the parchment, its edges frayed and yellowed with age. As he unfolded it, the words became clear, revealing themselves as a deed to a piece of land worth more than he could fathom. "Well, I'll be..." Bill breathed, his heart racing with excitement and disbelief. $2 million, and it was hiding right under my nose. But even as he marveled at his unexpected fortune, a sudden icy draft swirled through the wagon again, stronger this time, as if the very air had come alive. Roger growled low in his throat, the fur along his back bristling, and Bill's instincts kicked in. Something wasn't right. The feeling of being watched crept over him like a dark cloud. "Easy, boy," he whispered, glancing around the wagon's cramped interior. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and the air felt thick with anticipation. "I reckon we're not alone." He tucked the deed under his shirt, his heart thumping like a runaway horse. "Let's get a move on, Roger. I got a feeling we ain't welcome here." As he stepped outside, the coolness enveloped him like a ghostly embrace, and Roger's growls intensified, the dog straining to peer into the darkened canyon. Bill squinted into the shadows, where the fading light made shapes dance and flicker. "Whatever's out there, I reckon it ain't friendly," he said, tightening his grip on the deed. With each step away from the wagon, the air grew heavier, the silence more oppressive. The canyon walls loomed, a silent audience to whatever fate awaited them. Bill could feel the weight of the hidden treasure pressing down on him, but it was the unease of the unseen that quickened his pulse. The night was closing in fast, and with it, secrets that were better left undisturbed. "Let's hightail it, Roger," he said, casting one last glance back at the Moldy Wagon, a sense of dread settling in his gut. "There's something mighty peculiar about this place, and I aim to find out what it is, before it finds us first." Bill took a step away from the Moldy Wagon, the unease in his gut gnawing at him like a hungry coyote. Roger, ever the vigilant companion, scanned the darkening canyon with a keen eye, his instincts sharper than a rattlesnake's fangs. The sun had dipped low, leaving only a smear of orange and purple across the horizon, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters among the rocks. "Come on, boy," Bill murmured, his voice steady though his heart raced. "Let's find a place to settle for the night. I reckon we'll need our wits about us come dawn." He felt the weight of the deed pressing against his chest, a treasure that could change everything, but that very promise now felt like a noose tightening around his neck. They moved away from the wagon, the crunch of gravel underfoot breaking the eerie silence. Bill's eyes darted about, scanning for signs of life or danger. "Shouldn't be too far to the creek," he muttered, recalling the map he had memorized before leaving town. "Might be a good spot to make camp, and I can keep my eyes peeled for whatever's lurking in these parts." Roger trotted alongside him, his nose to the ground, sniffing for scents that told stories only a dog could decipher. They reached a narrow path that led into the underbrush, the whispering leaves and rustling branches sounding like soft voices beckoning him deeper. Bill hesitated, glancing back at the wagon, the darkened doorway an ominous maw that seemed to beckon him back. "Ain't no point in turning back now," he grumbled, shaking off the dread. "Onward we go." As they ventured further, the trees closed in around them, their twisted branches reaching out like bony fingers. The atmosphere shifted, thickening, as if the very air had turned to molasses. Bill pulled his collar tight against the chill, the hairs on his arms standing on end. "This ain't no ordinary place," he said, his voice a low whisper, half expecting the shadows to answer him. "Easy, Roger," he said when the dog suddenly froze, his ears perked high and his body tense. "What is it, fella?" Bill followed Roger's gaze, his own instincts flaring up as he scanned the tree line, the darkening shapes shifting in the twilight. But nothing moved, just the whisper of the wind. After a moment, Roger relaxed slightly but remained alert, and Bill took a deep breath to steady himself. "Let's keep on," he urged, and they pressed forward, eventually reaching the edge of a small creek that wound its way through the canyon like a silver ribbon. The water bubbled softly, a soothing sound that momentarily eased Bill's frayed nerves. "This'll do just fine," he said, kneeling to fill his canteen. As he did, his fingers brushed against something hard and cool, a rock perhaps. He pulled it from the water, revealing a small, flat stone engraved with strange symbols that glinted in the fading light. "Now what in tarnation?" he breathed, turning the stone over in his hands. The carvings were unlike anything he had ever seen, twisting and swirling in patterns that seemed to dance before his eyes. The feeling of being watched returned, stronger now, sending a shiver down his spine. "This don't feel right, Roger," he said, glancing back at the tree line. "What do you reckon this is?" Roger barked softly, stepping back as if the stone held some unseen power. Bill frowned, sensing the unease radiating from his loyal companion. "Might just be a marker or some old relic," he reasoned, though doubt lingered in the corners of his mind. "Could be worth investigating, but we ought to stay sharp." He tucked the stone away, the coolness of it lingering in his palm, then set about gathering firewood. He worked quickly, his hands moving with the practiced ease of a man who had spent years on the frontier. With a few strikes of flint, he ignited the kindling, the fire crackling to life and casting flickering light that pushed back the encroaching shadows. As the warmth spread, Bill settled back against a large rock, eyes fixed on the dancing flames. "Guess we'll have to keep watch tonight, eh?" he said, glancing at Roger, who lay close by, still alert. "Can't shake the feeling that something ain't quite right." The fire crackled and popped, but the night grew deeper, and with it came an unsettling quiet. Not even the wind dared to whisper. Bill's thoughts drifted to the deed, the promise of wealth and a new beginning, but the unease settled like a stone in his gut. "If there's a fortune to be had, I reckon there's bound to be trouble to go with it," he mused. Suddenly Roger stood, ears perked, tail stiff. He let out a low growl, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the firelight. Bill's heart raced as he followed the dog's gaze, the shadows shifting as if alive. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, voice barely above a breath. Then, from the depths of the trees came a rustle, and Bill felt the air grow colder still. A figure emerged, silhouetted against the pale moonlight, tall and shrouded, cloaked in shadows that seemed to cling to it like a second skin. Bill's breath caught in his throat, and he felt the weight of the hidden treasure shift ominously in his chest. "Who goes there?" Bill called, voice steady despite the fear creeping in. The figure paused, the air thick with tension, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the answer that would seal his fate. The figure remained motionless, a dark statue against the luminous backdrop of the moonlit sky. Bill's pulse quickened as he gripped a nearby stick, its rough bark a reassuring presence in his hand. "I ain't looking for trouble, but I'm not afraid to defend what's mine," he called out, voice firm, though the tremor beneath belied his confidence. The figure shifted slightly, and Bill squinted against the night. He could make out a broad-brimmed hat that cast shadows over the face, obscuring any features. "State your business," he barked, summoning every ounce of courage he had. Roger, sensing the tension, let out a low growl that seemed to echo in the stillness. In response, the figure lifted a hand, and Bill's heart sank as he saw the glint of silver, a badge, weathered and tarnished, hanging from the figure's chest. "Easy there, cowboy," a voice rumbled from the shadows, deep and gravelly. "I'm just passing through looking for a spot to rest my bones." "Rest your bones, huh?" Bill narrowed his eyes, still on guard. "What brings you this way? Ain't much around but ghosts and troubles." "More like troubles and ghosts, if you catch my drift," the figure replied, stepping forward into the firelight, revealing a gaunt face lined with years of hardship. His clothes were threadbare, but his posture held a certain authority. "Name's Silas, and I reckon you're the one they're talking about, the fellow with the deed." Bill's heart raced at the mention of the deed. "What do you know about it?" Silas chuckled, the sound rough like gravel underfoot. "Word travels fast in these parts, friend. There's nothing more valuable than land, especially when it's tied to old curses and buried secrets." "Curses?" Bill echoed, skepticism creeping into his voice. "What kind of curses?" The man's eyes gleamed with a flicker of mischief, or was it fear? "They say the land you're fixing to claim has seen more than its share of blood. Folks lost their minds over it, and others just vanished. Some say the spirits of the wrong still wander, looking for a reckoning." Bill's mind raced back to the stone he had found in the creek. "And what's that got to do with me?" he pressed, a knot of apprehension tightening in his gut. "Everything if you believe in what's hidden in the shadows," Silas said, his gaze shifting to Roger, who had settled back, still watchful, but less growly. "That dog of yours ain't just for show, is he?" "Roger's as loyal as they come," Bill replied, feeling a strange camaraderie with the stranger. "And if you're trying to spook me, it ain't gonna work. I've seen my fair share of strange out here." "Then you know better than to ignore the signs," Silas said, leaning closer to the fire, the light illuminating the creases of worry etched in his forehead. You've got something in your possession that others will kill for. You're not just a ranch hand looking to make a living. You're a mark, and it won't be long before someone comes sniffing around. Bill's mind whirled, the implications crashing down on him like a summer storm. So what do you suggest? I can't just up and leave. Silas shrugged, the weight of the world resting heavily on his shoulders. Keep your eyes peeled, and don't trust anyone, not even those who seem friendly. You'll find the truth buried deep, and if you're smart, you'll figure it out before it's too late. The words hung in the air, thick and foreboding. Bill glanced at Roger, who was now sniffing the ground, as if searching for something more than just the scent of damp earth. You reckon there's something else out there? He asked, not wanting to believe it, but sensing a strange connection between the dog's behavior and Silas's words. Could be, Silas replied, leaning back, eyes narrowing as he watched Roger with keen interest. Animals sense what we can't. They see the spirits that linger, the ones still looking for their peace. Bill felt a shiver creep up his spine. Then we best be careful. But I ain't about to turn tail and run. I'll face whatever's out there. Just tell me what to look for. Silas leaned in closer, the firelight flickering across his face. Listen, if you find any more of those strange stones or symbols, don't take them lightly. They could be a key to what's buried beneath that land of yours. Just know this, knowledge can be a double-edged sword. The more you know, the more danger you invite. As Silas spoke, Roger suddenly barked, a sharp, piercing sound that sent Bill's heart into overdrive. The dog was on his feet, ears perked, tail straight as an arrow. What is it, boy? Bill asked, rising to his feet, eyes darting toward the shadows where the trees loomed like ancient sentinels. From the darkened edge of the trees came a rustle, more pronounced this time, like the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate. Bill's instincts flared. We ain't alone, he said, his voice low and urgent. Silas straightened, a wary look crossing his face. You best get ready. It seems trouble's found you faster than I thought. Bill's heart raced as he prepared himself, feeling the weight of the hidden deed and its potential for riches and curses, now more tangible than ever. Whatever was out there, he would face it head-on, just as he had faced the trials of the frontier. With Roger by his side and the fire flickering a protective glow, he took a deep breath, ready to confront whatever specter awaited them in the night. The air thickened around Bill as he squinted into the inky darkness beyond the firelight, heart thumping like a runaway horse. Roger stood at attention, his posture taut with alertness, nose twitching as he sniffed the air, ears pricked for any sound. Easy, boy, Bill whispered, though his own voice betrayed a tremor of uncertainty. Silas seemed to dissolve into the shadows, his earlier bravado fading like smoke. Whatever's out there don't mean you no good, I reckon, he said, his voice now a low murmur, almost lost to the rustling leaves. Keep your wits about you. If you've got any sense left, you'll know when to stand firm and when to hightail it. With a determined nod, Bill moved closer to the edge of the firelight, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. He could feel the ground beneath him, solid and familiar, yet the prickling sensation on the back of his neck told him he was standing on the cusp of something far more sinister. The weight of the deed in his pocket felt like lead, pressing against him as he took a cautious step toward the shadows. "Show yourself," he called out, voice steady despite the quaking in his chest. "I ain't looking for trouble, but I won't back down from it neither." A silence fell, heavy and oppressive, punctuated only by the occasional hoot of an owl, distant and haunting. Roger shifted beside him, tail lashing nervously, ready to spring into action. The dog was a beacon of loyalty, a steadfast companion through the dust and grit of life on the frontier. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the gloom, silhouetted against the faint light of the stars. Bill squinted, his hand instinctively moving to the pocket where he kept his hunting knife. "Who goes there?" he called again, heart racing as the shape drew closer. "Easy there, friend," came a voice laced with a southern drawl, smooth as molasses. "Ain't looking for no trouble, just passing through." The figure stepped into the firelight, revealing a tall man in a weathered coat, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. Bill's grip on the knife tightened. "What do you want?" "Name's Eli," the man said, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I heard tell of a lost treasure. Some folks say it's cursed. Figured I might find a lead or two out this way." Bill exchanged a glance with Silas, who remained silent, eyes narrowing at Eli. "You got no business sniffing around my land," Bill replied, his voice firm, the tension in the air palpable. "Now hold on a minute," Eli said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "That land ain't just dirt and grass, friend. It holds secrets that could make a man rich or take him straight to hell." Bill felt a rush of unease wash over him. "You'd best steer clear of that kind of talk. I ain't in the mood for ghost stories." But Eli's eyes gleamed with a fervor that made Bill's skin crawl. "It ain't no story, son. Folks have been known to vanish just like that." He snapped his fingers, the sound echoing in the stillness. "They say it's the spirits, restless and angry over what was taken from them." "You got something they want, don't you?" Bill's breath caught in his throat. "And just how would you know that?" "I hear things," Eli said, voice dripping with a mix of charm and menace. "Like how a ranch hand bought himself a Moldy Wagon and ended up with a fortune wrapped in mystery." He stepped back, gauging Bill's reaction. "But it ain't just the treasure you should be worried about, my friend. It's the price that comes with it." Roger let out a low growl, sensing the tension thickening in the air. Bill glanced down at his loyal dog, who stood guard, ready to defend against whatever darkness lingered in the night. "You got no right to be here," Bill said firmly, forcing his voice to stay steady. Eli raised his hands again, but his eyes flickered with something darker. "You don't know what you're meddling in, do you? That land has its own heartbeat, and it don't take kindly to intruders." "Enough of your riddles," Bill shot back. "What do you want?" Eli smirked, a glint of teeth showing in the firelight. "Just a piece of advice, friend. If you're gonna dig up the past, you best be prepared for what it brings up with it." With that, he turned and melted back into the shadows, leaving Bill standing there, heart racing and mind churning. The fire crackled, the flames dancing with an otherworldly flicker, and Bill felt an icy chill run down his spine. "What the hell was that all about?" he muttered under his breath, casting a wary glance toward the tree line. Silas broke the silence, his voice low and grave. "He's not wrong, you know. The spirits of the land are restless, and you've stepped right into the middle of their quarrel. You best figure out what you've got before it drags you down into the depths." Bill swallowed hard, the weight of his circumstances pressing down on him like a heavy yoke. "I will," he replied, resolve hardening within him. "But how? I ain't got no clue where to start." Roger, ever perceptive, began to move toward the edge of the firelight, sniffing the ground with urgency. Bill followed, curiosity piqued as the dog seemed drawn to a particular spot among the scattered stones. "Come on, Roger, what you got?" Bill encouraged, kneeling beside his faithful companion as he dug at the dirt with his paws, unearthing a small, jagged stone, similar to the one he had found in the creek. As Bill picked it up, a shiver coursed through him. The stone was cold and smooth, etched with symbols that sent his mind racing. "What in tarnation?" he muttered, brushing the dirt away to reveal more intricate carvings. Silas leaned closer, eyes widening in recognition. "That's not just any stone, friend. Those markings are ancient. They tell a story of the land, a history buried deeper than you can imagine. You'd best find someone who knows what they mean, and fast." Bill felt the weight of the night settle around him, an oppressive blanket of mystery and danger. With Roger at his side and a newfound determination igniting within him, he stood tall. Whatever secrets lay hidden in the shadows, he would unravel them. The frontier was as treacherous as it was vast, and it was time he learned to navigate its depths. "Let's get to work," Bill said, pocketing the stone. "If there's a story to be told, I aim to hear it." With Roger leading the way, they moved forward into the night, ready to uncover the truths that lay buried beneath the surface, and perhaps face the specters of the past head-on. The night was a cloak of darkness, woven tight with shadows and secrets, as Bill and Roger ventured away from the flickering warmth of the campfire. The moon hung high, casting a pale light that turned the world into a silvery ghostland. Each tree and rock contorted into strange shapes. Bill's heart thudded in his chest like a hammer striking iron, the chill of the night air mingling with the heat of his resolve. "Let's see what we can dig up, partner," he whispered to Roger, who had already taken the lead, sniffing the ground with a keen nose that seemed to sense more than mere scent. They moved cautiously, the crunch of gravel underfoot punctuating the stillness, while the cool breeze rustled through the pines, carrying whispers of the past. Bill pulled the jagged stone from his pocket, its surface catching the moonlight, glimmering like a lost treasure. Each mark etched into the stone felt alive under his fingertips, pulsing with a history that beckoned him closer. "Maybe we can find a clue or two about what this all means," he mused aloud, his voice a mere breath against the night. He thought of Eli's ominous words. If the land had a heartbeat, it was one that throbbed with an unsettling urgency, like a warning bell tolling in the distance. Roger paused, his ears perked, tail stiff with alertness. The dog's instincts had never failed Bill, and he trusted them more than his own intuition at times. "What is it, boy?" he asked softly. The dog turned his head slightly, as if listening for something just beyond the veil of silence. Then, without warning, he darted forward, drawn to a cluster of gnarled roots that erupted from the earth like twisted fingers. Bill hurried to catch up, his heart racing with anticipation. As he reached Roger, he knelt beside the roots, feeling the rough bark and damp soil beneath his hands. "What you got here, eh?" he murmured, brushing aside the dead leaves and dirt. It was then he saw it, a faint glimmer beneath the roots, catching the moonlight. Bill dug cautiously, working to uncover whatever lay hidden. A few moments later, he unearthed a small, rusted tin box, its lid barely clinging to the hinges. He felt a rush of excitement, the thrill of discovery coursing through him like wildfire. "Now we're cooking with gas," he said, his voice low but filled with fervor. With Roger watching closely, Bill pried the lid open. Inside, he found a collection of old papers, yellowed and fragile. He lifted them out, careful not to tear the delicate sheets. As he spread them across his lap, he squinted at the faded ink, trying to decipher the words. "Looks like some kind of journal," he said, flipping through the pages. "Maybe it belonged to a settler." His fingers traced the looping script, written in a hurried hand that spoke of hardship and hope. "The land does not forget," he read aloud, a chill creeping up his spine. "What in tarnation does that mean?" He continued, piecing together fragments of a life once lived, tales of cattle drives and crop failures, but also of buried treasures and hidden secrets. The deeper he read, the more he sensed a lurking presence in the shadows, a weight pressing against his chest. Roger's low growl broke through the heavy silence, and Bill felt a shiver run down his spine. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, looking around. The wind rustled the trees, and for a heartbeat he could have sworn he heard distant voices echoing from the depths of the land. Suddenly, the air grew thick with tension, and Bill's senses sharpened. Something was amiss, and it wasn't just the remnants of the past. He could feel eyes on him, an unseen weight watching, waiting. "We best be careful, Roger," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't like the feel of this." With renewed urgency, Bill rifled through the journal, searching for anything that could offer guidance. The entries spoke of a hidden spring and a map that had once guided the settlers to prosperity. "A spring, huh?" he muttered. "Maybe that's the key." His fingers grazed over a rough sketch, the ink smeared and faded, but still somewhat recognizable. It depicted a small creek winding through the hills, marked by an X, where the treasures were said to be buried. As he turned to show Roger, a sudden rustle in the underbrush caught his attention. Bill froze, heart racing. What in the world was that? He scanned the tree line, the shadows deepening as if something lurked just out of sight. Roger growled again, a low rumble that echoed the unease settling in Bill's gut. "Let's get back to camp," Bill urged, stuffing the journal back into the tin box and securing it tightly. "We'll study this in the light of day." But as they turned, the air shifted, heavy with a palpable tension. Bill felt as though they were no longer alone. The feeling gnawed at him, a cold grip of fear mixed with the thrill of the hunt. Each step back toward the camp felt like a step deeper into a web of the unknown, and as they moved, he could almost hear the whispers growing louder, as if the very land itself was trying to tell him something. "Come on, Roger," he urged, quickening his pace. The fire's glow beckoned like a lighthouse through a storm, promising warmth and safety. "Let's get out of this dark." But as they reached the edge of the clearing, the flames flickered violently, sending shadows dancing across the trees. Bill's heart raced anew as he realized the fire was not merely flickering, it was fighting against something unseen, something restless that had been stirred from its slumber. He glanced back one last time into the darkness, a sense of foreboding settling in his bones. The frontier was vast and wild, filled with untold stories and dark mysteries, and as Bill stepped into the circle of light, he couldn't shake the feeling that the true journey had only just begun. The fire crackled and popped, its warmth wrapping around Bill like a familiar old quilt. Yet the shadows it cast danced with an unsettling energy, flickering in ways that made him feel like eyes were tracking his every movement. He settled down beside the blaze, still clutching the rusted tin box, the journal tucked safely inside. Roger, ever watchful, paced in circles around the perimeter of their camp, his ears perked and nose twitching, as if sensing something amiss that Bill could not. "Take it easy, boy," Bill murmured, tossing a few more twigs into the fire. "Ain't nothing but the wind playing tricks on us." He hoped his own words would steady his racing heart. The journal lay heavy in his lap, filled with words of hope and despair that lingered like the scent of sagebrush after a rain. He opened it once more, the brittle pages crackling like dried leaves. "Let's see what else you got for me," he whispered, scanning the entries. The words danced before him in the flickering light, and a chill crept down his spine as he read a passage about a curse laid upon the land by a betrayed settler. "The shadows hold the secrets of those who wandered too far." Bill read aloud, his voice barely above the murmur of the wind. "What in tarnation does that mean?" Roger paused in his vigilant patrol, his ears flicking toward Bill as if he understood the gravity of the words. Bill looked up from the journal, glancing around the clearing, half expecting the shadows to answer him. The night was filled with the sounds of the wild, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves. But beneath it all was a silence, a stillness that hinted at something waiting, watching. With the fire crackling beside him, Bill took a deep breath and steeled his resolve. "This land's given me the creeps, but I ain't about to let it win," he said, more to reassure himself than anything. He needed a plan, a way to unravel the mystery that lay intertwined with the land itself. Setting the journal aside, he rummaged through the few supplies he had left. A tattered map lay at the bottom of his pack, creased and weathered, but still somewhat legible. He unfolded it, the lines showing the familiar landscape of the area, mountains, creeks, and trails marked with the names of long-forgotten settlers. He traced a finger along the winding path that led from their camp to a location noted as Whispering Springs. "Could be the place mentioned in the journal," he said, a hint of excitement creeping into his voice. "But we'll need to head out at first light. No sense wandering around in the dark." Just then, Roger let out a low growl, his body tense as he stared into the shadows beyond the campfire. Bill turned sharply, heart pounding in his chest. "What is it, boy?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The wind howled through the trees, the branches creaking ominously, and for a moment Bill could swear he heard a distant echo of laughter, ghostly and far away, twisting through the air. "I reckon it's just the night playing tricks," he said, though doubt laced his words. But Roger wasn't convinced. He approached the tree line cautiously, ears perked and nostrils flaring. Bill followed, his curiosity piqued. They moved together, the firelight fading as they approached the edge of the clearing. "Stay close, Roger," Bill cautioned, peering into the shadows where the light struggled to reach. The trees loomed tall and ancient, their gnarled branches creating a tangled web overhead. "If there's something out there, I don't want it finding us unawares." The silence hung thick, as though the world was holding its breath. Bill squinted, trying to make out shapes in the dark, when a sudden rustle sent Roger barking, a sharp warning that echoed in the stillness. "What in the name of Sam Hill?" Bill exclaimed, instinctively stepping back toward the fire. Just then, a figure emerged from the shadows, stumbling into the clearing as if drawn by the fire's glow. Bill's heart raced as he took in the sight before him. a ragged man, clothes tattered and dirt smudged, with wild eyes that glinted like a desperate animal's. "Help me!" the man gasped, collapsing to his knees. "They're coming for me! The shadows, they want me!" Bill's instincts kicked in. "Easy there, partner," he said, voice steady despite the wildness of the scene. "You're safe here. Just breathe." He glanced at Roger, who was now poised, ready to protect his master, but hesitant in the presence of the frantic stranger. "Who's coming for you?" Bill asked, crouching down to the man's level. "What do you mean by shadows?" "They're angry," the man stammered, sweat glistening on his brow. "I took something that wasn't mine. A deed it was. A treasure buried deep where the spring used to flow." His eyes darted back toward the trees, as if the shadows themselves were creeping closer. "They'll claim me if I don't return it." Bill felt the weight of the man's words settle over him like a thick fog. "A deed?" he asked, remembering the journal's mention of buried treasure. "You mean the one tied to the old settler?" "Yes!" the man cried, voice rising in urgency. "You've got to listen. The land remembers, and it wants its due. You find the spring, you find the truth." The shadows at the tree line shifted, the air growing heavier, as if the very earth around them was listening, waiting for Bill's next move. The night was alive with mystery, and Bill felt the thrill of the hunt pulsing through his veins, both terrified and exhilarated by the path that lay ahead. "All right," Bill said, locking eyes with the man. "You got my attention, but first you tell me everything you know. We ain't got much time." As the fire crackled behind them, the night deepened, wrapping around them like a shroud. And Bill knew in his bones that the true adventure was just beginning. The man's eyes shone with a wild desperation as he gasped for breath, his voice a frantic whisper filled with dread. "You don't understand. I can feel them out there, in the dark. I thought I could take it for myself, thought I'd get away clean. But the land, it remembers." Bill nodded, mind racing. The man's fear was contagious, yet Bill felt a flicker of determination burn brighter than the fire at his back. "All right, take it easy now. You say there's a treasure tied to this spring. What can you tell me about it? Don't leave out a single detail." The man rubbed his hands together as if trying to stave off the chill creeping into his bones. "They say the spring was blessed by the spirits of the land, water that healed the sick and brought life to the crops. But then the settlers came, and greed twisted their hearts. They buried the deed when the water dried up, hiding it from the world." Bill shifted his weight, glancing at Roger, who remained alert, ears perked up, scanning the darkness as if it were alive. "So, this deed, where do I find it?" "Follow the creek upstream, past the old oak," the man urged, his voice trembling. "You'll know it when you see it. The whispers of the water tell the truth, but you gotta be careful. The shadows don't take kindly to trespassers." Bill frowned, pondering the man's rambling. "Shadows, huh? You mean spirits or something worse?" "Worse," the man replied, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "They're vengeful. You can hear them if you listen close enough. A mournful song, like a lullaby that lures you in. But it's a trick, and if you heed the call, you won't come back." "Then we'll be sure to keep our wits about us," Bill said, feeling the weight of responsibility resting squarely on his shoulders. "You stay here by the fire. I'll take Roger and scout out this spring. We'll be back before you know it." The man nodded, fear still etched on his face. But Bill could see a flicker of hope. "Just be careful. The shadows aren't the only thing you got to worry about. There are things buried in this land that should stay buried." With a determined nod, Bill slipped on his worn hat, the brim casting a shadow over his eyes as he motioned for Roger to follow. They stepped into the darkness, leaving the glow of the fire behind them, the weight of the night pressing against their backs like a heavy coat. The moon hung high, a silver coin in the inky sky, casting an otherworldly glow upon the landscape. Bill kept his senses sharp, listening for the sounds of nature around him. The wind rustled the leaves, and the faint sound of the creek bubbled in the distance, a soft whisper that seemed to beckon him forward. "Let's find out what these whispers are about, Roger?" he murmured, glancing down at his trusty companion. The dog's ears perked, and he let out a soft woof as if understanding the weight of their task. They moved with purpose, following the faint path that wound through the trees, the ground crunching beneath their boots. The further they ventured, the more the atmosphere thickened, the air tinged with an electric tension that prickled at Bill's skin. He squinted into the shadows, every branch a potential threat, every rustle a warning. As they approached the creek, the sound grew louder, a gentle melody that flowed like silk. Bill slowed his pace, hand resting on the handle of his knife, instincts honed from years on the frontier guiding him. "This is it, boy," he said quietly, kneeling by the water's edge, the moonlight dancing across its surface. "Let's see what secrets you hold." The creek wound like a serpent through the landscape, its waters glimmering with a life of their own. Bill peered closely, spotting smooth stones glistening beneath the surface, but nothing that resembled a deed or treasure. Still, he remembered the man's words. The spring would reveal itself if he listened closely. "Can you hear that, Roger?" Bill asked, tilting his head to catch the delicate strains of the water. At first, it was just the sound of flowing water, but then, almost imperceptibly, a low hum began to rise, a haunting lullaby that sent shivers down his spine. Roger whined softly, his body tense as he scanned the perimeter. Bill shook his head, dismissing the rising unease. "It's just the creek, partner. Just the creek." But as he looked deeper into the shadows, the whispers intensified, swirling around him like a cold breeze. Bill's heart raced as he felt the presence of something watching him from the depths of the trees, the night suddenly feeling too quiet, too still. "All right, let's not dawdle," he muttered, forcing himself to shake off the feeling. He stood up, scanning the banks for any sign of the spring. A gnarled oak tree loomed ahead, its branches twisted like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. It seemed to beckon him closer. "Looks like we've found our landmark," he said to Roger, who remained on high alert, watching the trees with wary eyes. Bill approached the oak, its bark rough and weathered, and reached out to touch it. The moment his fingers grazed the surface, a strange vibration coursed through him, as if the tree itself was alive, sharing secrets from centuries past. He circled the oak, examining the ground around its roots, when something caught his eye, an odd glimmer peeking through the damp earth. He knelt down, heart racing, and began to dig with his hands, brushing away the dirt and leaves. Each scoop felt heavier, and the low hum of the creek seemed to grow louder, urging him on. As he dug deeper, he unearthed a small, weathered box, its surface marred by time. Bill's breath caught in his throat as he brushed off the dirt, revealing intricate carvings that depicted scenes of life long gone, settlers gathering around a fire, children playing, and, at the very center, a spring flowing freely. "By the looks of it, we might just be on to something," he said, carefully lifting the box into his lap. The hum around him intensified, a chorus of voices swirling in the air, their words indistinguishable yet hauntingly familiar. But before he could pry it open, Roger growled low in his throat, a sound filled with warning. Bill froze, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. The shadows at the edge of the clearing seemed to deepen, gathering like a storm. "Whatever's out there, it ain't friendly," Bill muttered, glancing around, his heart hammering. "We need to move, Roger, now." He quickly secured the box beneath his arm, rising to his feet as the night air thickened with an eerie tension. The whispers in the wind grew louder, rising in pitch, and with a swift turn, he made for the path back to camp, Roger close at his heels. The shadows danced around them, twisting and turning like phantoms, the night alive with an unseen threat. Bill felt the weight of the box against his side, a promise of treasure and danger intertwined, urging him onward as the darkness closed in behind them. He could feel the spirits of the land watching, and with every step, the mystery deepened, drawing him closer to the truth that lay buried within the whispers of the night. Bill's boots crunched softly on the gravel path as he made his way back to camp, the moonlight casting a pale glow over the landscape. Each step felt like a race against time, the shadows creeping closer with every moment. Roger kept pace beside him, his ears perked and nostrils flaring, ever vigilant for the unseen threats lurking in the night. "Steady, boy," Bill whispered, trying to calm his own rising anxiety. The box pressed against his side, its weight both reassuring and ominous. "We'll be back at the fire in no time, and then we can figure out what this is all about." But as they neared the flickering light of the campfire, a chill swept through the air, wrapping around Bill like a cold shroud. The light seemed to flicker uncertainly, casting shadows that danced unnaturally upon the ground. He felt the hairs on his arms stand on end, a sign that the spirits of the land were not yet finished with him. "Something ain't right," he muttered, halting just short of the fire's warm embrace. Roger's low growl vibrated through the stillness, an instinctive warning that sent a fresh jolt of tension through Bill's spine. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. "Let's see what we can uncover before the night gets any darker." Crouching down, he carefully placed the box in the dirt, brushing the surface to rid it of the earth that had clung to it. The intricate carvings glowed under the firelight, revealing details that had been hidden by time. "What secrets do you hold?" he murmured, fingers tracing the delicate lines. The hum from the creek still reverberated in his mind, a melody entwined with the whispers of the wind. Bill took a moment to gather his thoughts, recalling the tales he'd heard around campfires about lost treasures and the spirits that guarded them. Might be this here box is more than just a relic. With a firm grip, he tried to pry the box open, but it wouldn't budge. He glanced around, ensuring the area was still clear before searching his pockets for a small knife. As he began to work at the latch, Roger remained tense, scanning the darkness with unwavering focus. "Easy, boy," Bill said, feeling the tension radiating from the dog. "Ain't no rattler in the brush, just old memories waiting to be stirred." After a few moments of fiddling, the latch finally clicked, and the lid creaked open, revealing its contents. Bill's breath caught. Inside lay a collection of faded papers, their edges worn and yellowed with age. His heart raced as he carefully lifted them out, his fingers shaking slightly. The first sheet was a deed, its bold lettering proclaiming ownership of a vast expanse of land near the old town of Cedar Grove. His eyes widened at the number of acres listed, the value of which could change a man's fortunes overnight. "2 million, huh?" he whispered, incredulity mingling with excitement. Now that had put me back in the saddle. Yet, beneath the deed, he spotted something else. An odd, folded parchment with an intricate design that resembled the old oak tree outside. With a swift flick of his knife, he opened it, revealing a map etched in delicate ink. The lines twisted and turned, marking pathways through the hills and valleys. At the center of the map was a symbol that seemed to echo the carved images on the box, a spring with water flowing freely. "Now we're on to something," he said, tracing the lines with his finger. "Looks like this spring is more than just a figment of old tales." But before he could delve deeper into the map, the air around him thickened, and the whispers surged again, louder this time, rising in a cacophony that rattled the bones. Bill's heart raced, a primal instinct kicking in as he shot a glance towards the tree line. "Did you hear that?" he asked Roger, who remained fixated on the shadows, growling softly. "Sounds like them spirits are mighty restless tonight." A sudden gust of wind swept through the camp, extinguishing the fire with a puff, plunging them into darkness. The only light came from the pale moon, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. Bill's breath quickened, and the hairs on his neck prickled. He could feel it, a presence, ancient and watchful, lurking just beyond the reach of the moonlight. "All right, let's not panic," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "We've come this far, and I reckon we can't turn back now." With the box tucked securely under his arm, he stood, ready to face whatever mysteries lay ahead. Roger growled more fiercely now, eyes locked on the shadows. "We'll figure this out, partner," Bill assured him, determination igniting in his heart. "Just gotta keep our wits about us." As they made their way cautiously towards the tree line, the whispers crescendoed, swirling around them, beckoning. Bill felt a pull in his chest, the promise of the spring calling to him like a lost friend. He glanced back at the campfire's dying embers, knowing the world beyond it was fraught with danger, but also untold adventure. "Let's find that spring, Roger," he said, stepping into the darkness, the map guiding him forward as he ventured into the unknown. The night was alive with secrets waiting to be uncovered, and Bill was ready to face whatever shadows lay ahead. Bill pressed forward, the night closing in around him like a blanket woven from shadows and whispers. The map, crinkled and delicate, felt heavy in his pocket as he navigated through the underbrush. The soft crunch of dried leaves and twigs beneath his boots, the only sounds punctuating the silence. Roger stayed close, his nose twitching and ears perked, a vigilant sentinel in the dark. "Stick close, partner," Bill murmured, casting an uneasy glance over his shoulder. The faint glow of the moon barely illuminated the path ahead, and the trees loomed like sentinels, their gnarled branches reaching out like the hands of long-forgotten spirits. The night air was thick with the scent of damp earth and pine, a reminder of the wilderness that surrounded him. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the whispers grew softer, almost like a lullaby, luring him deeper into the forest. Bill could feel the weight of the old tales pressing on his mind, stories of treasure hidden by the spirits of the land, and the misfortune that befell those who sought it out without respect. "You gotta tread carefully when you mess with the unseen," he muttered under his breath, recalling the warnings he'd heard from old-timers at the saloon. The map, with its delicate lines and symbols, burned a hole in his pocket. It was more than just a parchment. It was a key to something beyond his understanding. He stopped for a moment to take it out, spreading it against the trunk of a nearby tree. The intricate design of the spring marked at its heart pulsed with a strange energy, almost as if it were alive. "What do you think, Roger?" he asked, though he knew the dog couldn't answer. Still, there was something in the way Roger sniffed the air, ears perked, that told him the dog sensed the same pull he did. "This here spring could be our ticket to a better life, or it could be the end of us both." With renewed determination, Bill studied the map closely, tracing the winding paths with a calloused finger. A small creek was marked just a few miles north of their location, and Bill recalled a tale he'd heard about a lost spring that could heal the sick, a place shrouded in mystery and guarded by restless spirits. "Let's get a move on," he said, folding the map carefully before tucking it away. "Time's a-wasting, and I reckon we might be running out of luck if we don't find that water soon." As they continued on, the trees thickened and the underbrush became denser. Bill pushed through the brambles, his heart thumping in his chest. The deeper they went, the more the air seemed to shimmer with a strange energy, as if the very land was alive. Roger moved ahead, nose to the ground, then paused abruptly, his body tense. "What you got there, boy?" Bill asked, squinting into the darkness. Roger barked softly, a low growl rumbling from deep within his chest. Bill stepped cautiously forward, his senses heightened. He could feel the tension in the air, a palpable energy that crackled like electricity. Suddenly, Roger lunged toward a cluster of bushes, and Bill followed, heart racing. "What's got you all riled up?" he asked, peering into the thick foliage. As he pushed aside the branches, he gasped. There, half buried in the dirt, was an old rusted lantern, its glass cracked but still intact. It bore the same intricate carvings as the box. "Now, what in tarnation?" Bill murmured, reaching down to grasp it. He could almost feel a connection between the lantern and the box, as if they were pieces of a larger puzzle. He brushed the dirt off, revealing more carvings that twisted into shapes resembling the spring from the map. As he examined the lantern, the whispers returned, soft and inviting, yet laced with an underlying warning. Bill's breath quickened. "There's something here, Roger," he said, his voice a mixture of excitement and trepidation, like these items are calling out to each other. Just then, the wind picked up again, swirling through the trees and sending a shiver down Bill's spine. He clutched the lantern tightly, feeling the cold metal against his palm. "We're onto something, but I reckon we ought to be careful," he said, casting a wary glance around. Roger turned suddenly, his gaze fixated on a point deeper within the woods, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Bill's heart pounded in his chest as he turned to follow the dog's line of sight. A flicker of light danced between the trees, dim yet insistent, like a firefly trying to lead them home. "Yonder's a light," Bill said, excitement bubbling up despite the foreboding feelings. "Could be the spring, or it could be something far worse. But we can't turn back now, not with fortune and fate hanging in the balance." He gestured for Roger to stay close, and together they moved towards the light, the whispers growing louder, intertwining with the rustling leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. The lantern felt warm in his grip, as though it too were alive, guiding him toward the unknown. As they approached, the light flickered and danced, revealing an old stone well surrounded by a ring of ancient trees. The air around it shimmered, and Bill felt a pull in his chest, an irresistible urge to draw nearer. "By the looks of it, we've struck gold," he whispered, his voice barely above a breath. But as he stepped closer, he couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone, that something was watching from the shadows, waiting to see what would unfold next. "Hold your ground, Roger," he whispered, gripping the lantern tighter, a flicker of fear threading through his excitement. The night was alive with secrets, and he was right at the heart of it all, teetering on the edge of discovery or disaster. As Bill stood before the ancient stone well, the flickering light cast long shadows across the ground, twisting the gnarled roots of the trees into grotesque shapes. He felt a chill run down his spine, a reminder that this place was steeped in mystery and possibly danger. Roger, ever vigilant, shifted at his side, the fur on his back bristling as he sniffed the air, alert to unseen threats. "Easy now, boy," Bill murmured, kneeling beside the well. "Let's see what this here contraption holds." He reached into his pocket for a scrap of cloth, his fingers brushing against the rough fabric as he used it to wipe the dust from the stone's edge. The well was old, its stones weathered and worn, but there was a peculiar marking etched into one side, a symbol that matched the intricate carvings on the lantern. "Looks like we ain't the first to take an interest in this place," Bill muttered, tracing the symbol with his finger. The air around him thickened, the whispers rising in a gentle crescendo, almost as if the spirits of the land were urging him forward. "Now what do you reckon it means?" With a steady breath, Bill leaned over the well, peering into the darkness below. The air was damp and musty, filled with the scent of earth and something else, something sweet and inviting, yet tinged with decay. He reached for the lantern, holding it over the opening. The light flickered, casting golden rays that danced upon the water's surface, revealing what lay beneath. To his astonishment, he spotted a cluster of shimmering coins resting on the bottom, glinting like stars scattered across a night sky. His heart raced. "Good Lord, Roger, this could be it! Gold, silver, or some kind of treasure!" But just as quickly as the excitement surged, a twinge of doubt crept in. But why would it be down there, hidden away in this old well? Roger let out a low growl, and Bill turned to see the dog's keen eyes locked onto something off to the side, beyond the trees. "What is it, boy?" Bill asked, rising to his feet, the lantern swaying in his grasp. The whispers faded momentarily, replaced by an unsettling silence. Roger padded forward, the leaves crunching beneath his paws. Bill followed closely, a sense of unease creeping into his bones. As they moved away from the well, they stumbled upon a clearing bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. In the center stood an ancient oak tree, its branches twisted and gnarled, resembling the hands of a giant reaching for the stars. Nestled at the base of the tree was a small wooden box, partially hidden by fallen leaves and debris. "Now what have we here?" Bill said, his curiosity piqued. He approached cautiously, kneeling beside the box. It bore the same intricate carvings as the lantern, and his pulse quickened. Could be a treasure chest, or a curse waiting to happen. He glanced at Roger, who was sniffing around the base of the tree, his ears perked and alert. "Keep your eyes peeled, partner," Bill warned. "This ain't no ordinary find." With trembling hands, he lifted the box, feeling its weight. The wood surprisingly sturdy despite its age. As he pried it open, a rush of cool air escaped from within, carrying with it the scent of old parchment and something floral, sweet yet haunting. Inside lay a bundle of yellowed papers, tied with a fraying piece of twine. Bill's heart raced as he carefully unwrapped it, revealing a faded map, similar to the one he had seen earlier, but marked with additional notes and symbols, some of which matched the markings on the lantern and the well. "Looks like we hit the jackpot, Roger," he breathed, studying the map intently. "This here could lead us to that lost spring." But as he turned the map, a chill wind whipped through the clearing, rustling the leaves and sending a shiver down his spine. "Hold steady, boy," Bill said, glancing around. The air was thick with tension, a sense that the spirits of the land were stirring, restless and watchful. "I feel like we're being watched." Roger's growl deepened and Bill straightened, instinctively gripping the lantern tighter. The shadows around them seemed to deepen, and from the corner of his eye he caught a flicker of movement, something shifting just beyond the trees. His heart raced as he whispered, "Let's not linger, partner. We've stirred something that ought to stay asleep." With the map clutched tightly in one hand and the lantern in the other, he turned back toward the well, where the promise of treasure, and perhaps danger, awaited. As they retraced their steps, the whispers returned, soft and insistent, weaving through the branches above like a lullaby from the past. "Whatever this is, it's leading us somewhere," Bill muttered, glancing over his shoulder. The flicker of light from the lantern felt like a beacon in the enveloping darkness, guiding him through the eerie woods. "We'll find that spring, but I reckon we best tread lightly. We're not just hunting for water now, we're searching for answers, and sometimes answers come with a price." As they neared the well, Bill felt an unsettling certainty settle in his gut. The path ahead was fraught with mystery, and with every step he could sense the pull of the unknown. Whether it would lead to salvation or doom, only time would tell. As Bill and Roger neared the well, the cool breeze carried with it the scent of damp earth and something else, something faintly floral, as if the very ground was whispering secrets of days long past. The moonlight pooled at the edge of the clearing, its silvery glow illuminating the well's ancient stones. He placed the lantern down beside the worn bricks, casting warm light into the dark abyss below. "All right, let's take another gander down there," he murmured, glancing at Roger. The dog's ears were perked, nostrils flaring as he caught every scent that floated on the night air. Bill could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy as molasses. "You keep an eye out, boy. If anything stirs, I want you barking like a madman." He leaned over the edge, peering into the well's depths, the shimmering coins still glinting below like lost stars. The excitement bubbled up within him again, but he forced himself to focus. With a small stick, he prodded the surface of the water, sending ripples skimming outward. "What's down there, huh? Gold, silver, or just a heap of trouble?" The whispers grew louder, swirling around him like the tendrils of a storm. Bill shook his head, dismissing the unsettling sound as his imagination playing tricks in the dark. He turned back to the lantern, his heart hammering in his chest as he contemplated the map's cryptic markings. "Reckon this here map's gonna lead us to something," he said softly, as if sharing a secret with Roger. "But what in tarnation is that spring?" He pointed to an X marked on the map, nestled between jagged mountain symbols. "Ain't no spring I've heard tell of, but looks like it could be a long ride." Roger whined softly, his gaze still fixed on the tree line. Bill felt a prickling sensation at the nape of his neck. "You feeling that too, boy?" he asked, rising to his feet. "Something's not right." He tucked the map into his pocket and picked up the lantern once more, the light flickering as he turned to face the trees. With a firm grip on the lantern, Bill approached the well. "We'll need to figure out how to get those coins out of there, see if they're worth their weight in gold," he muttered, surveying the stones. "Could be a simple job, just need to lower a bucket or something." As he spoke, Roger's growl deepened, echoing in the stillness of the night. The hairs on Bill's arms stood on end, and he felt a shiver creep down his spine. "What is it, Roger?" he whispered, squinting into the shadows. The dog stood rigid, his nose lifted high, tracking a scent that made Bill's stomach churn. "Ain't no critter around these parts that ought to be out at this hour," Bill said, pulling the lantern closer. "Let's not go stirring up more trouble than we can handle." Suddenly a rustling echoed from the underbrush, and Bill instinctively stepped back, raising the lantern higher. The light flickered erratically, casting elongated shadows that danced along the ground. "Show yourself," he called, his voice steadier than he felt. To his astonishment, a figure emerged from the darkness, a man dressed in ragged clothes, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. "You're trespassing, friend," the stranger said, his voice low and gravelly, like stones grinding against one another. Bill's heart raced, but he held his ground, squaring his shoulders. "Didn't mean no harm, just looking for answers," he replied, keeping his voice calm. "What brings you out here at this hour?" The man stepped closer, revealing a weathered face lined with deep creases, eyes glinting with an odd mix of curiosity and caution. "You found something you ought to leave alone," he warned, a slight tremor in his voice that hinted at a deeper knowledge. "That well ain't just a well, it's a door, and what's on the other side ain't meant for the likes of you." Bill exchanged glances with Roger, who remained tense, muscles coiled as if ready to spring. "A door to what?" Bill asked, curiosity piqued despite the man's foreboding words. "Memories, lost things," the stranger replied, taking a step back as if the very mention of the well could unleash something dreadful. "They say it holds the spirits of those who've come before, restless souls bound to the land. You take from it, you'll pay a price." A shiver ran through Bill, but he couldn't shake the allure of the treasure. "Is that so? And what kind of price are we talking about?" "Your peace, your sleep," the man warned, his gaze flicking to the trees. "Best you leave it be. You'll find nothing but sorrow down that well." Bill hesitated, the weight of the lantern heavy in his hand. "I reckon I'll decide what's best for me, thank you kindly," he said, his voice firm despite the unease pooling in his gut. "But I ain't here to quarrel, just looking for a way to make a living in this barren land." The stranger's expression softened, a hint of sympathy glimmering in his eyes. "You're a stubborn one, aren't you? Just like the rest of them." He turned his gaze toward the well, a flicker of regret passing over his features. "If you do go down that path, remember this. Sometimes the answers ain't worth the trouble they bring." With that, the man stepped back into the shadows, leaving Bill with nothing but the echoes of his warning and the oppressive weight of the night air. Roger let out a low whine, and Bill knelt beside him, uncertainty swirling in his mind. "Looks like we've got more to ponder than just a map," he said quietly, the weight of the stranger's words heavy on his heart. "Let's not be hasty, Roger. We'll figure this out, but we best do it right." As they turned to leave the clearing, the whispers intensified, winding through the branches like a haunting melody. Bill felt the pull of the unknown tugging at him, urging him to uncover what lay hidden beneath the surface. Whether it would lead to fortune or ruin remained to be seen, but one thing was certain: the journey ahead would be anything but ordinary. As Bill and Roger made their way back to the Moldy Wagon, the darkness of the night seemed to close in around them, thick and suffocating. The faint light of the lantern flickered, casting ghostly shadows on the ground. Bill felt a knot of tension coil in his stomach, the stranger's warning echoing in his mind like a distant thunderstorm. "Didn't mean to scare you, did he, boy?" Bill murmured, scratching behind Roger's ears. The dog looked up at him, his eyes bright and alert, as if he understood the gravity of the moment. "Ain't no need to get jumpy, but I reckon we ought to be cautious." The wagon creaked under the weight of their burden, the old wood groaning as Bill rummaged through its contents, searching for anything that might give him a clue about the well or the coins. He found a rusty shovel, some old rags, and a faded map that smelled of mildew. Spreading the map on the wagon floor, he squinted at the inked lines and markings. "Now this here could be useful," he said, tracing a route with his finger. "Might show us where the old trails lead, and maybe, just maybe, we can find out what's going on around that well." Roger paced restlessly, nose to the ground, sniffing at the scents that lingered in the air. Bill could see his ears perk up, and he paused, sensing the dog's heightened awareness. "What is it, boy?" he asked, raising his lantern to illuminate the surroundings. Just then, a low howl broke the stillness, sending a chill racing down Bill's spine. The howl was not from any coyote or wolf he had ever heard. It was deeper, more mournful, and seemed to resonate from the very earth beneath him. Roger growled softly, muscles taut with unease. "Let's stay sharp, partner," Bill said, his voice steady, even as his heart thudded in his chest. "We ain't alone out here." He stepped out from the wagon, drawn toward the well once more, the lantern's glow flickering against the stones as he approached. The air felt thicker here, almost electric. "What is it you're hiding?" he whispered to the well, feeling a pull he couldn't quite explain. With resolve, he set the lantern down and grasped the shovel, the wood rough against his palms. "If there's treasure down there, I reckon I'll need to dig a bit deeper." He began to clear the area around the well, his movements methodical and deliberate. As he worked, the ground beneath his feet shifted slightly, and he paused, glancing at Roger. The dog had planted himself beside the well, watching with an intensity that made Bill's skin crawl. "Easy, boy," Bill said, trying to quell the rising tension. "Just a few more scoops, and we'll see what's what." As he dug, the shovel struck something hard and unyielding. Bill knelt down, brushing away the loose dirt, revealing a stone slab partially buried in the earth. "Well, I'll be," he murmured, running his fingers over the edges of the slab. It felt cool to the touch, and a shiver raced up his spine. "What do you reckon this is?" Roger stepped closer, sniffing at the edges, his tail stiff with caution. With a grunt, Bill heaved on the slab, but it wouldn't budge. "Might need a bit more muscle," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. He retrieved the lantern, placing it beside him to get a better look. "Ain't no use sitting on our hands." After a few more attempts, he managed to pry it loose. The stone shifted with a reluctant groan, revealing a darkened void beneath. Bill's breath caught in his throat as he peered down into the inky blackness. "This here's something else," he whispered, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Roger growled softly, sensing the disturbance in the air. Bill took a step back, considering the implications. "Could be a hiding place for them coins, or it could be something far worse," he said, looking at the well again. "What do you think, Roger?" He glanced at the dog, who seemed to be studying the hole with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Shall we take a closer look, or do we leave well enough alone?" Roger wagged his tail, almost as if encouraging him, and with a deep breath, Bill made his decision. "All right, let's see what's down there." He fashioned a rope from the rags he had found in the wagon, tying it securely around the lantern. "If I drop this down and it don't come back up, we'll know to steer clear," he said, his voice steady despite the anxiety creeping into his heart. He lowered the lantern carefully into the darkness, watching as it disappeared from view. The silence that followed was thick, and Bill felt time stretch as he waited, muscles coiled like a rattlesnake ready to strike. Just as doubt began to creep in, the lantern flickered back into view, the faint glow illuminating the walls of the opening. "Looks like it's safe enough," he said, heart racing as he tied the rope around his waist, preparing to descend. "Just me and you, Roger. Let's see what secrets this old well's holding." With one last glance at the stars twinkling overhead, Bill took a breath, lowering himself into the abyss, the rope steady in his hands as he slipped into the unknown. The world above began to fade, replaced by the echo of his heartbeat and the promise of whatever lay ahead. As Bill descended into the well, the rough texture of the stone walls scraped against his palms, and the scent of damp earth filled his nostrils. The lanterns swayed lightly, casting erratic shadows that danced across the walls like ghostly figures caught in a waltz. He felt the coolness of the air wrap around him, thick and heavy as a quilt, whispering secrets of the past that made his skin prickle with anticipation. Roger stayed vigilantly above, his sharp eyes fixed on the darkness of the well, nose twitching as he picked up scents that were both familiar and foreign. It was as if the dog could sense the very weight of history pressing down from the depths. Bill grunted softly as he reached the bottom, his boots hitting the ground with a muted thud. The space was cramped, just enough for him to crouch comfortably. He took a moment to catch his breath, the lantern light revealing a narrow chamber lined with stone. "Looks like a right cozy spot for a treasure," he muttered to himself, glancing around. The walls glistened with moisture, and the floor was strewn with debris, old roots and stones, remnants of the earth above. He edged closer to the lantern's light, revealing an odd shape jutting out from the far wall. "Now what have we got here?" he whispered, squinting to make sense of the shadowy figure. As he approached, he could see it was a small wooden chest, its surface marred by age and neglect. Bill's heart raced as he knelt beside it, fingers trembling with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Let's hope you ain't a bust," he murmured, lifting the chest to examine it. The wood was worn but surprisingly sturdy, with iron bands that looked as if they could withstand a good tussle. He glanced back up toward the surface, where Roger remained steadfast, then turned his focus back to the chest. With a deep breath, Bill set to work, feeling along the edges for any hidden latches or locks. "Ain't gonna be easy, are ya?" he said, gritting his teeth as he found a small clasp that was rusted shut. He retrieved a nearby stone, using it to tap gently at the clasp. With each strike, the metal groaned in protest. and Bill could almost hear the echoes of those who'd come before him. After several tense moments, the clasp finally sprang open with a dull click. Bill lifted the lid, the hinges creaking like the old bones of a weary traveler. Inside, the lantern's light illuminated a collection of faded papers, yellowed and brittle, along with a handful of coins that glinted like forgotten stars. "Now we're talking," Bill whispered, carefully sifting through the contents. He picked up a few coins, feeling their weight in his palm, but it was the papers that caught his attention. They were covered in looping script, and as he unfolded one, his heart raced. It was a deed. Its words faded but still legible enough to discern. He read it aloud, his voice echoing softly in the confined space. "Hereby transfers ownership of the old Quigley Ranch, located on the banks of the Bitter River, to one Jeremiah T. Quigley." Bill's brow furrowed as he read the date, a time long past. $2 million, huh? That's a whole heap of change in today's world. As he continued to examine the deed, a strange sensation prickled at the back of his neck. It was as if the air around him had thickened, drawing tight like a noose. Roger's growl echoed from above, a deep rumble that sent a shiver down Bill's spine. He glanced up, but the darkness above was impenetrable. "Stay alert, boy," Bill called softly, his instincts on high alert. "Something feels off." Just as he uttered the words, a faint whisper curled through the air, barely audible, like the rustling of dry leaves. Bill strained to listen, his heart racing anew. "Bill!" The voice was a breathy sound that drifted through the chamber, almost melodic, and yet laced with a haunting quality that set his teeth on edge. "Who's there?" he called, his voice steadier than he felt. The shadows around him seemed to shift, coiling like smoke, and he could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching him. "Bill," the voice repeated, and this time it was closer, echoing off the walls as if it was circling him. "All right, I don't take kindly to tricks, so you best show yourself," he said, his hand instinctively reaching for the knife tucked in his boot. The air was thickening, the temperature dropping as if the very earth was exhaling a chill. Suddenly, Roger barked, a sharp warning that cut through the tension. Bill's heart raced as he turned his attention back to the chest. He could feel the presence growing stronger, a force he couldn't quite name, and it made his skin prickle with unease. "Let's get out of here, Roger," he said, stuffing the papers back into the chest and slamming the lid shut. He scrambled for the rope tied around his waist, feeling the pressure of time slipping away. The whispers intensified, swirling like a tempest around him, filled with longing and sorrow. As he climbed back toward the surface, the sensation of being followed pressed heavily upon him. Every instinct urged him to hurry, to escape the depths before whatever lay in the shadows could reach out and claim him. "Come on, Roger, we gotta move," he called out, urgency threading through his voice as he ascended. The lantern bobbed at his side, casting frantic light against the walls, illuminating the dark secrets that lingered just out of reach. He could feel the weight of the papers in his pocket, the promise of wealth and the echoes of a history that seemed to stretch beyond the grave. Just as Bill reached the top, he felt a rush of cold air sweep past him, and he barely caught a glimpse of a figure standing at the edge of the well, a fleeting shadow that flickered in the lantern light before vanishing into the night. He emerged, breathless and wide-eyed, pulling himself up and into the open air. "What in tarnation was that?" he gasped, glancing around. Roger stood guard, hackles raised, eyes fixed on the darkness. "Whatever it was, I reckon it didn't take kindly to us poking around." Bill wiped sweat from his brow, his pulse still racing as he clutched the lantern. "But we ain't done yet. We got a ranch to stake a claim on." With resolve steeling his spine, he turned toward the horizon, the promise of dawn just beginning to break. There were mysteries to unravel, and he had a feeling the old Quigley Ranch was far more than just a deed waiting to be claimed. Bill stood on the cusp of the night, the cool air biting at his skin as he squinted into the darkened expanse ahead. The sky was a tapestry of stars, twinkling like secrets yet to be uncovered. Roger, ever vigilant, sniffed the ground, his ears perked and attentive, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. There was more to this land than met the eye, and Bill could feel the weight of history pressing down on him like an old coon hound at the end of a long day. "All right, boy," Bill said, his voice low and steady. Let's get a move on. He carefully tucked the deed into his shirt pocket, its crinkled edges a reminder of the treasure buried beneath layers of time and dust. With a determined step, he headed toward the faint outline of the old Quigley Ranch, the promise of the sun's first light breaking over the horizon, whispering of new beginnings. The ranch lay several miles ahead, a ghostly silhouette against the darkened sky. Bill had heard tales of the place, how it once thrived with life and laughter before falling into ruin. Folks said it was cursed, haunted by the spirits of those who had lived and died there. But Bill wasn't one to put stock in ghost stories. He was a man of the earth, practical and grounded. If there was a deed worth $2 million, he intended to find it, no matter what shadows lingered in the corners of the past. With Roger trotting by his side, Bill made his way down the dusty trail, the earth crunching beneath his boots. The crisp morning air filled his lungs, invigorating him, sharpening his senses. He had learned long ago that to be a ranch hand was to be both a caretaker and a detective. Every hoofprint, every rustle in the brush told a story. As they approached the ranch, the first rays of sunlight began to spill over the horizon, illuminating the dilapidated structure. It was a weathered old place with peeling paint and sagging beams, but there was a certain beauty in its desolation. Bill paused, taking in the sight of it, the way the morning light danced upon the cracked surface, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets of their own. "Seems like no one's been here in ages," he murmured, stepping cautiously onto the porch. The wood creaked beneath his weight, a dissonant harmony with the stillness of the air. Roger sniffed the ground, his nose twitching as he explored the remnants of a bygone era. "I reckon we ought to start with the barn," Bill decided, glancing down at the old structure that leaned precariously to one side. "If there's anything worth finding, it's likely to be there." With a nod to Roger, they made their way toward the barn, the door hanging ajar like an invitation from the past. Inside, the scent of hay and wood mingled with something far more unsettling, an odor of decay that lingered like a specter. Bill pulled his bandana up over his mouth, his heart pounding as he stepped inside, the beams of sunlight streaming through the cracks in the walls, illuminating motes of dust that danced in the air. "Stay close, boy," he whispered, scanning the dim interior. Old tools hung on the walls, rusted and forgotten, while the remnants of broken machinery lay strewn across the floor. He took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unease that settled in his gut. There was something about this place that felt alive, as if it were breathing alongside him. As he searched, Bill's fingers grazed over a stack of old crates, and he felt a tingle of anticipation. "What do we have here?" he murmured to himself, pulling one crate closer. It was heavier than it looked, the wood splintered and cracked. With a grunt, he pried it open, revealing old farm tools and some dusty linens, but it was the glint of metal that caught his eye. Reaching deeper into the crate, his fingers brushed against something cold and smooth. With careful precision, he pulled out a tarnished locket, its surface engraved with a delicate pattern. He flipped it open, revealing a faded photograph of a woman whose eyes seemed to pierce through time. "Now ain't you a sight," he said, studying the image. "What's your story, darling?" A low growl from Roger snapped him back to reality. The dog was standing rigid, staring toward the far corner of the barn, where shadows clung like a shroud. Bill felt his heart race again, and he turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as he stepped closer. There, half hidden behind a pile of hay bales, was a shape, a bundle of cloth, weathered and worn. Bill approached cautiously, the locket clutched tightly in his hand. As he neared, he could see it was an old saddlebag, its leather cracked and faded, but still intact. With a quick glance back at Roger, who remained alert and watchful, Bill knelt down and opened the flap. Inside lay a trove of old letters, their edges yellowed with age, tied with a fraying piece of twine. "Well, I'll be," he breathed, his fingers trembling as he reached for the first letter. The writing was elegant yet shaky, a stark contrast to the rough edges of the ranch. "Dearest Eliza," he read aloud, the name sounding foreign on his tongue. "I fear the shadows grow long, and the night will soon swallow me whole." Bill's breath caught in his throat, the weight of the words heavy with foreboding. There are things in this land that man was never meant to know. The hairs on the back of his neck prickled, and he felt that same chill creeping back in, as if the very air thickened around him. He knew he was onto something that connected the past with the present, but a sense of dread loomed large. "Looks like we ain't alone after all," he muttered, glancing back at Roger, who stood firm, eyes fixed on the shadows that seemed to shift and swirl, echoing the whispers that had haunted him at the well. With a newfound urgency, Bill stuffed the letters back into the saddlebag, determined to uncover more of the story that lay buried within these walls. Whatever dark secrets this place held, he was ready to face them head-on. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, urging him to unravel the mysteries that lingered like ghosts waiting to be set free. "Let's see what else we can find, partner," he said, his voice resolute as he moved deeper into the barn, the whispers of the past guiding him through the shadows. Bill's heart raced as he shifted through the dim light of the barn, the air thick with the scent of old wood and decay. Every creak of the floorboards seemed to echo the unspoken tales of the ranch, and he could feel Roger's watchful gaze at his side, the dog's ears perked and body tense. The shadows held secrets, and Bill was determined to drag them into the light. "Let's see what else we can dig up," he murmured, moving further into the barn's depths, his boots scraping against the rough-hewn planks. He glanced back at Roger, who sniffed the air, his nose twitching as he caught wind of something more than dust and hay. Bill crouched low, scanning the ground for anything that might have slipped through the cracks of time. The barn's interior was a patchwork of light and shadow, and he focused his attention on the corners, where the darkness hung thickest. As he swept his hand along the wall, a cold draft sent a shiver down his spine, as if the barn itself were exhaling secrets long held. "Gonna find more than just hay bales and cobwebs. I can feel it," he said, more to himself than Roger, who let out a low growl, a warning against the unseen. He moved toward a stack of crates in the far corner, their wood splintered but sturdy. One of them seemed to have a peculiar shape, bulging in a way that suggested it was more than just an empty box. With a grunt, he wrestled the crate free and pried it open. Inside, he found an assortment of old tools, but there was something nestled beneath them. A dusty glass bottle, its label almost obscured by time. "What in tarnation?" Bill whispered, lifting the bottle closer to the sunlight that streamed through the broken slats above. The faded lettering revealed a name, Dr. Harlan's Elixir. The words seemed to shimmer with an unearthly light, and an inexplicable chill danced down his spine. "Just old snake oil," he chuckled nervously, but he could feel Roger tense beside him, the dog's instinct warning him of something more. Bill turned the bottle over in his hands, noticing it was heavier than it looked. He unscrewed the cap, and a pungent aroma of herbs and something sharper wafted up, filling the air with a heady scent that reminded him of forgotten tales. "What do you make of it, boy?" he asked Roger, who sniffed at the bottle, his ears laid back as if he sensed the weight of history. The dog turned his gaze toward the far wall, where the shadows grew darker, a flicker of movement catching his eye. Bill straightened, squinting at the darkened corner. "What's got you so riled, Roger?" he asked, heart pounding louder now. He cautiously edged toward the wall, where the light struggled to penetrate. Just then, a faint scraping sound echoed, a sound like nails on wood. "Easy now," he muttered, inching closer, the bottle clutched tightly in his hand. The air around him thickened, and he felt as if the barn were holding its breath. Roger growled softly, his stance shifting to a low crouch, eyes fixed on the shadows. With a deep breath, Bill reached for the edge of a weathered plank and pulled it away, revealing a small crack in the wall. The darkness seemed to pulse as he leaned in, and something glimmered in the murky depths, a glint of metal, catching what little light filtered through. "Can't be," Bill whispered, reaching through the crack with trembling fingers. He grasped the object and pulled it free, revealing a small iron key, cold and rusty but still solid. "Now what do you unlock, I wonder?" he pondered aloud, turning the key over in his palm, the surface engraved with intricate symbols that hinted at a tale far older than the ranch itself. A sudden rustle from behind him made him jump. He spun around, heart racing, to find Roger standing rigid, his eyes locked on the shadows. The hairs on Bill's arms stood on end, and he knew they were not alone. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice steady despite the tremor in his gut. The barn remained silent, but the air shifted, and Bill felt a chill slide down his spine. Roger growled low, a rumble of warning that sent a shudder through Bill. He could feel the atmosphere thicken, a palpable tension building, as if the barn itself were alive with an unseen presence. "Come on out! I ain't here to cause trouble," Bill said, his heart pounding like a drum. He scanned the shadows, searching for a glimpse of movement, but all he found was darkness cloaked in mystery. Then he recalled the letters in the saddlebag, the haunting words that had called out to him. "There are things in this land that man was never meant to know." He couldn't shake the feeling that this was connected. Whatever lay in the depths of the barn, whatever ancient secrets the ranch held, were entwined with the key in his hand. "Roger, stay close," he said, determination filling his voice. He knew he had to uncover the truth, whatever it may be. Slowly, he backed away from the shadows, clutching the key tightly. He would find the lock it belonged to, and he would unlock the mysteries that had been buried for too long. As he retreated from the darkened corner, the air shifted again, and Bill felt the weight of unseen eyes upon him. But he pressed on, driven by a desire for answers, the thrill of the chase igniting a fire in his belly. The ranch had stories to tell, and he was hell-bent on hearing them, no matter how haunting the echoes of the past might be. Bill's heart raced as he emerged from the shadowy corner of the barn, the iron key cold against his palm. The dust motes danced lazily in the beams of light that managed to pierce through the gaps in the wood, oblivious to the tension that gripped the air. Roger remained vigilant, his gaze fixed on the darkness, as if it were a predator waiting for its moment. Bill could feel the weight of history in the barn, a lingering essence of lives lived and forgotten, and he could not help but wonder how deep the roots of the ranch ran into the earth. With each step he took, the floor creaked beneath him like a whispered warning. He had seen too many things in his life, things that slipped between the cracks of reality. And now, with the key in his grasp, he felt as if he were on the brink of something monumental. "You're right, old friend," he muttered to Roger, who had shifted closer, his nose twitching as he sniffed at the air. "We've got to find where this little piece fits." Bill stepped cautiously toward the far side of the barn, where the shadows lurked thicker than molasses. He could feel a draft, cool and unnerving, that hinted at an opening, perhaps a hidden door or trap. The smell of aged wood and something more earthy hung heavily, almost suffocating, as he brushed aside a tangled web of cobwebs. "Gotta be careful," he said, mostly to himself, as he squinted into the dimness. His fingers brushed against the rough surface of the wall, and then he felt it, a slight indentation just below the surface. "Well, I'll be," Bill murmured, the feeling of excitement prickling at the back of his neck. He pressed against the wall, feeling for a latch or mechanism, and as he did, Roger began to bark softly, his instincts kicking into high gear. "Shh, boy," Bill urged, but the dog was having none of it. He whined, eyes locked on a spot above Bill's head. Following the dog's gaze, Bill tilted his head back to see a rusty hinge peeking out from a pile of old hay bales. "What have we here?" He reached up and brushed away the hay, revealing a small door, barely visible against the barn's weathered walls. The key felt heavier in his hand as he approached, an unspoken promise of what lay beyond. Bill's pulse quickened. He could almost hear the whispers of those who had come before him, beckoning him to uncover the truth. "Let's see if this old lock still works," he muttered, kneeling to insert the key into the keyhole. It fit snugly, a perfect match, as if it had been waiting for him all this time. He turned it slowly, feeling the mechanism click and groan in protest, and with a final twist, the door creaked open, revealing a narrow space that led into darkness. Bill held his breath, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something that tugged at the edges of his memory. He glanced back at Roger, who was now at his side, ears perked and ready. "Let's go see what ghosts are hiding in here," he whispered, gathering his courage as he took a step inside. The passage was barely wide enough for him to squeeze through, and the darkness enveloped him like a thick blanket. He fumbled for a match, striking it against the rough timber, and the flickering light revealed walls lined with old crumbling stones. The space felt ancient, as if it had been forgotten by time itself. "Just a little further," he coaxed Roger, who hesitated at the threshold, tail tucked low. The dog seemed to sense something unsettling, but Bill pressed on, drawn deeper into the unknown. As the match burned low, he caught sight of something glinting in the shadows ahead, a faint shimmer that beckoned him closer. "What in tarnation?" he breathed, squinting to see better. He stepped forward, and the light from the match flickered off a dusty, ornate box resting on a pedestal of stone. The craftsmanship was unlike anything he'd seen on the frontier, intricate designs winding around it like the vines of a long-forgotten tale. With a cautious hand, he lifted the box, feeling its weight and the energy thrumming beneath the surface. "This must be what the key opens," he murmured, glancing back at Roger, who watched with eyes wide and alert. The dog's unease spurred Bill's curiosity, and he quickly set the box down on the ground. The latch was adorned with the same symbols as the key, each line telling a story he was desperate to uncover. Bill's fingers danced over the surface, tracing the engraved patterns as he worked to unfasten it. The latch clicked open with a sigh, as if the box had been holding its breath for decades. He lifted the lid slowly, revealing a treasure trove of documents, each one faded and yellowed with age. His heart raced as he rifled through the contents, feeling the weight of history in his hands. Among the papers, a single folded parchment caught his eye, marked with an official seal. With trembling hands, he unfolded it, revealing a deed written in elegant script, the ink still legible despite the years. "This can't be," Bill breathed, eyes widening as he read the words aloud. "The deed to the old Silver Creek mine?" He could hardly believe what he was seeing. The mine had been long thought to be nothing but a myth, a ghost story told around campfires, a fortune buried beneath the earth, waiting for someone brave enough to claim it. As he absorbed the implications, Roger began to whine softly, his instincts prickling with unease. Bill glanced up, suddenly aware that the air had shifted again, thickening around him like a storm gathering on the horizon. A chill crept into the small chamber, and he felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. "Easy, boy," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, but his heart raced in his chest. The shadows seemed to grow darker, closing in as if the very essence of the barn had come alive. He could hear the faint echo of whispers in the air, not quite discernible but filled with a sense of urgency. "Roger, we best get out of here," Bill said, tucking the deed carefully back into the box. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, but the ominous presence around him was undeniable. The secrets of the ranch were awakening, and he could not linger longer in their shadow. With Roger at his side, Bill retraced his steps, heart pounding as he navigated the narrow passage back into the barn. The air felt electric, charged with the energy of the past colliding with the present. Just as he reached the threshold, a sudden gust of wind howled through the barn, sending a cascade of dust swirling around him. "Hold on tight, Roger," Bill said, stepping back into the light. As he exited the dark passage, he felt a shiver race down his spine, and he glanced back, half expecting to see something emerge from the shadows. But the barn stood silent, its secrets once again hidden from view. Bill's heart pounded, the weight of the deed heavy in his pocket, a tangible connection to the mysteries that lay ahead. He could feel the threads of fate tightening around him, and the thrill of adventure ignited a fire in his belly. With Roger by his side, he knew they were just beginning to unravel the tales woven into the very fabric of the land, a journey that would lead them down paths they could scarcely imagine. The sun hung low in the sky as Bill stepped away from the barn, the fading light casting long shadows across the dusty yard. With Roger at his side, he felt the weight of the deed pressing against his thigh, a promise of adventure and perhaps a whisper of danger. The air was thick with the scent of earth and the distant sweet fragrance of wildflowers, but beneath it all lingered a chill that made him shudder. "All right, partner," Bill said, kneeling down to scratch Roger behind the ears. "We got ourselves a mystery to unravel, and it ain't gonna solve itself." The dog wagged his tail, ever loyal, but his eyes darted around as if he sensed something amiss. With a determined nod, Bill made his way toward the main house, a weathered structure that had seen better days but still held the spirit of the frontier. He climbed the creaky porch steps, each groan of the wood echoing the secrets of the past, and pushed open the door. Inside, the familiar scent of aged pine and dust welcomed him, along with the echoes of memories that seemed to whisper through the walls. He crossed to the old writing desk in the corner, its surface cluttered with odds and ends, a rusted horseshoe, a half-empty bottle of ink, and a worn-out ledger filled with figures that once kept the ranch afloat. Bill pulled out the chair, its legs scraping against the wooden floor, and set the ornate box down before him. "Let's see what you got for us," he murmured, his fingers tracing the intricate designs as he opened it again. The papers rustled softly in the stillness, and he spread them out, squinting to make sense of the faded text. The deed was the centerpiece, but he could feel there was more, hidden truths lying just beneath the surface. As he sifted through the documents, he caught sight of a map tucked beneath a brittle sheet. It was hand-drawn, with crooked lines and faded ink. Bill carefully lifted it, revealing the outlines of the surrounding land, dotted with names he recognized. Silver Creek Mine was marked with an ornate X, but there was also a symbol that looked like a starburst, radiating from a spot not far from the ranch. Could that be a clue? He wondered aloud, glancing at Roger, whose ears perked up at the mention of adventure. We might just have ourselves a treasure hunt. The dog gave a low whine, as if agreeing but also urging caution. With renewed determination, Bill rolled the map up and tucked it into his pocket alongside the deed. "We ought to get a move on before the sun takes its leave," he said, glancing out the window. The shadows were stretching longer, and he knew they needed to act before nightfall cloaked the land in darkness. The two of them set out, Bill leading the way with Roger close behind, ever watchful. They headed toward the hills that loomed in the distance, a rugged spine of rock and brush that promised both danger and discovery. As they walked, the wind whispered through the sagebrush, a soft murmur that felt like the echoes of long-gone souls sharing their stories. "Thinking this is where we find the mine?" Bill asked, glancing down at Roger, who had stopped to sniff at the ground. The dog lifted his head, his nose twitching as he locked onto a scent and began to lead the way with purpose. "You got a nose for treasure, don't you, boy?" Bill chuckled, following closely behind. The terrain grew steeper, and Bill's heart raced with the thrill of the chase. The late afternoon sun bathed the land in golden light, but the shadows of the hills grew ominous, deepening the sense of mystery that hung over the landscape. They crested a rise, and Bill paused, taking in the view. Below lay a rocky outcrop, its jagged edges jutting out like teeth from the earth, and nestled among the rocks was the entrance to a cave, dark and inviting. "Looks like we found ourselves a secret," Bill murmured, his excitement mingled with caution. He could feel Roger's tension beside him, the dog's instincts on high alert. "Let's check it out, but stay close." The entrance yawned before them, a gaping maw that seemed to breathe in the fading light. Bill took a deep breath, steeling himself, then stepped inside, the air cool and damp against his skin. The light from outside quickly faded, replaced by the musty scent of earth and the echo of dripping water. Roger pressed forward, his eyes shining in the darkness, and Bill followed, pulling a lantern from his pack. With a flick of a match, the lantern flared to life, casting a warm glow that pushed back the shadows. As they ventured deeper, the cave opened up, revealing walls glistening with moisture, the stone glimmering like 1,000 tiny stars. "Sure feels like a place where secrets could be hiding," Bill whispered, feeling the weight of the past pressing in around him. The beam of his lantern danced over the walls, illuminating ancient markings that seemed to tell a story of their own. His heart raced as he traced his fingers over the strange symbols, reminiscent of those he had seen on the box. "Now what do you reckon this means?" he pondered, glancing down at Roger, whose growl interrupted the silence, low and rumbling. Bill turned quickly, his heart thudding in his chest. In the shadows, he thought he caught a glimpse of movement, a flicker that darted just beyond the reach of the lantern's light. "Show yourself," Bill called out, his voice steady despite the quickening pulse in his veins. The darkness remained silent, the only sound the soft dripping of water and the rustle of his own breath. Roger stepped forward, alert and poised, ears perked, sniffing the air. The tension in the cave thickened, a palpable energy swirling around them as if the very stones were alive. Bill tightened his grip on the lantern, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. Whatever secrets lay hidden in the depths of this cave, he was determined to uncover them. As he took another step deeper into the darkness, the air seemed to shift, heavy with the weight of something ancient and powerful. It was a place where time stood still, where history and mystery danced in the shadows, and Bill knew with every fiber of his being that they were on the cusp of something extraordinary. The thrill of adventure surged within him, and he felt more than ever that fate had led him to this moment, to this very spot where the past and present were about to collide in ways he could scarcely fathom. Bill took a cautious step further into the cave, the lantern's flickering light revealing more of the ancient markings etched into the stone walls. They looked like the hieroglyphs of a lost civilization, telling tales of something grand and terrible. He squinted, trying to make sense of the symbols, when Roger suddenly whined softly, his body tense and poised. "Easy there, boy," Bill murmured, kneeling beside his faithful companion. "What do you sense?" He watched as Roger's nose twitched, drawing in the musty air, and the dog turned his gaze toward a narrow passageway on the left, dim and shadowy. "That there's a tight squeeze, but it might lead to something worthwhile," Bill said, his voice low. He pulled a bandana from his pocket and tied it around the lantern's glass to dim the light, a trick he'd learned while hunting at dusk. The glow softened, casting long, wavering shadows that danced on the walls. With Roger leading the way, they crept toward the passage. The air grew cooler, and the scent of damp earth and minerals intensified, tickling the back of Bill's throat. He felt a shiver run down his spine, not from the chill, but from the sensation that they were being watched, as if the stones themselves held a keen awareness of their presence. "Hold tight, partner," he whispered, nudging Roger forward. The dog hesitated, ears perked high, and sniffed the air again. Bill noticed a change in the atmosphere, a weight that pressed down upon them, thick and suffocating. As they slipped through the narrow opening, the passage opened up into a chamber that felt like a forgotten world. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like ancient teeth, and the walls shimmered with a layer of glistening minerals, reflecting the lantern's light in a cascade of colors. Bill marveled at the sight, but his attention was soon drawn to the far wall, where something caught his eye. "Now, what in tarnation is that?" he muttered, stepping closer. There, etched into the stone, was a large circle surrounded by intricate patterns that spiraled outward like the arms of a galaxy. In the center of the circle was a depiction of a man, but not just any man. He bore a striking resemblance to the portrait he'd seen back at the bank, the one associated with the deed he now carried. Could it be? Bill wondered aloud, tracing the outline of the figure with his finger. "Looks like the same fella, but what's his story?" Roger, still alert, growled softly again, his gaze fixed on a shadowy corner of the chamber. Bill turned to follow the dog's line of sight, and his breath caught in his throat. In the dim light, a pile of rocks appeared to shift slightly, as if something lay concealed beneath them. The air hummed with a tension that sent goosebumps prickling across Bill's skin. "Let's take a closer look," he whispered, heart pounding in his chest. He carefully approached the pile, kneeling down and brushing aside loose stones and dirt. The sound of scuttling made him freeze, and he glanced back at Roger, who was now standing guard, his eyes narrowed and fierce. With a gentle pull, Bill removed the last of the rocks, revealing a small weathered box, locked and rusted with age. It bore the same intricate patterns he had seen in the cave's markings, as if the two were connected in some secretive way. "By thunder, this might just hold the key to everything," he said, excitement bubbling in his chest. But just as he reached for the box, a sudden chill swept through the cave, and the flickering lantern flames sputtered violently. Bill's heart raced as he looked around, the shadows now shifting as if alive. "Roger!" he called out, gripping the lantern tighter. "Stay close, boy!" the dog barked, echoing through the chamber, but Bill's attention was drawn to the far wall, where the figure of the man seemed to flicker, his etched eyes glinting as if watching Bill's every move. A voice, soft yet powerful, echoed in the depths of his mind, a whisper that seemed to come from the stones themselves. "Release me." Bill's breath hitched, the air thick with an unexplainable energy. "What in the name of the Almighty is happening here?" he whispered, glancing back at Roger, who remained steadfast, a sentinel guarding against unseen threats. With a resolve born of desperation, Bill turned back to the box, examining the lock. It was old, but not beyond repair. He pulled out his trusty pocket knife and began to work at the lock, the metal clinking softly as he manipulated the mechanism. The whispers grew louder, swirling around him like a tempest, urging him to hurry. "Just a bit more," he muttered, sweat beading on his brow as he forced the lock to yield. With a final twist, he heard a soft click, and the box sprang open slightly. A surge of energy pulsed through the air, and Bill felt a warmth envelop him, as if the box itself were alive. "Whoa, easy now," he said, pulling back slightly. The lid creaked open, and inside lay a collection of small, glimmering stones, each one pulsating with a soft light. They were unlike anything he had ever seen, beautiful and terrifying all at once. As he reached in, a sudden tremor rumbled through the cave, sending dust and small pebbles cascading from the ceiling. Roger barked, the dog's instincts on high alert, and Bill felt the urgency of their situation pressing upon him. Whatever ancient power resided in this place was awakening, and they needed to escape before it unleashed something they couldn't control. "Let's haul tail, Roger," Bill shouted, slamming the box shut and clutching it to his chest. The lantern flickered wildly, casting frantic shadows as he made his way back toward the passage. The walls seemed to close in, the air charged with an unseen force that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. As they stumbled back into the main chamber, the echoes of the past filled the air, and Bill couldn't shake the feeling that they had awakened something that had lain dormant for far too long. The cave was alive, and whatever they had uncovered would change the course of their lives forever. With Roger at his side, Bill bolted from the cave, propelled by a mixture of fear and exhilaration, the weight of the box pressing against his chest like a heartbeat of its own. The sun had dipped low, the horizon painted in hues of orange and purple, but the darkness that loomed ahead held an uncertainty that sent shivers down his spine. As they emerged from the cave, Bill knew one thing for certain. They were no longer just searching for treasure. They were entangled in a web of secrets that ran deeper than the very earth beneath their feet. Bill stumbled into the fading light, the box clutched tightly against his chest, his breath coming in quick, ragged gasps. Roger, the ever-loyal dog, stood alert beside him, his ears perked and eyes scanning the surrounding landscape for any signs of danger. As the last rays of the sun cast elongated shadows, Bill felt an unsettling mix of anxiety and exhilaration coursing through him. "Easy now, boy," Bill murmured, kneeling to scratch Roger behind the ears. "We've stumbled onto something mighty peculiar, that's for sure." He took a moment to steady himself, glancing back at the cave entrance, which now loomed like the mouth of a great beast, ominous and foreboding. His thoughts raced back to the whispers that had echoed in the cavern, the strange energy that had enveloped him. But as he took a deep breath of the crisp evening air, clarity began to settle in. "It ain't magic, Roger. It's something else entirely," he said, the pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. With renewed determination, Bill made his way toward the nearby town of Dry Gulch. He needed to find Sheriff Caldwell, a man of sound judgment and a keen sense for detecting truth amidst deception. It was time to unravel the mystery of the glowing stones and the chilling presence they had encountered. The sheriff's office was dimly lit, the shadows cast by the flickering lanterns giving the room an air of foreboding. Sheriff Caldwell looked up from his desk as Bill burst through the door, Roger at his heels. "What in tarnation's got you all riled up, Bill?" Bill wasted no time, spilling out the story of their discovery and the eerie sensations that had engulfed them. Caldwell listened intently, his brow furrowing deeper with every word. "Sounds like you've stumbled into something more than just an old cave," he said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "But it might be a trick of some sort, not just an old legend come to life." Bill nodded, his mind racing. "You mean folks could be pulling a fast one? But who'd go to such lengths? Sometimes the lure of easy riches can turn a good man to mischief." Caldwell replied, his eyes narrowing as he contemplated the possibilities. Let's pay a visit to those old mining claims south of the river. There's been talk of a few men hanging around looking to stir trouble. With Caldwell in tow, Bill and Roger set out under the light of the rising moon, the night air crisp and charged with anticipation. As they approached the riverbank, Bill noticed an unusual flickering among the trees. "What's that?" he whispered, his instincts flaring. "Let's get closer," the sheriff urged, and they crept forward, the sound of hushed voices drifting through the night air. Hidden behind a cluster of bushes, they watched as a group of men gathered around a makeshift campfire, their hands busy with glimmering stones that mirrored the ones Bill had found. The men were laughing, but their mirth turned sinister as they plotted. "With these stones, we can convince the townsfolk there's a fortune to be found in the cave," one of them said, his voice low and scheming. "We'll have them believing in ghosts and treasures galore, and then we'll make off with their money." Bill's heart raced as the truth unfolded before him. There were no supernatural forces at play, just a group of deceitful men hoping to exploit the legends of the cave to fill their own pockets. "Caldwell, we've got to put a stop to this," he whispered, adrenaline surging through him. "Right you are," Caldwell replied, a determined look in his eyes. "We'll catch 'em red-handed." In a swift motion, the sheriff signaled to the townsmen, hidden in the shadows, to surround the camp. Bill could feel Roger's muscles tense beside him, the dog sensing the impending confrontation. As the lawmen descended upon the camp, chaos erupted. The rascals scrambled, but they were no match for the sheriff and his posse. "You boys are under arrest for fraud and conspiracy," Caldwell shouted, his voice booming through the night. The miscreants were apprehended, their plans thwarted. Bill stood back, heart swelling with a mix of relief and triumph. "I reckon we did it, Roger," he whispered, giving the dog a proud pat. With the deception laid bare, the townsfolk gathered, gratitude etched on their faces as they learned of the scheme. The sheriff ensured that the stones were returned to their rightful place in the cave, sealing it once more against the greed of man. As dawn broke over Dry Gulch, Bill stood with Roger, the weight of the box now resting safely in the sheriff's office, where it would no longer be a tool for treachery. The townsfolk had rallied, and as the sun cast its golden light over the land, they celebrated the spirit of community that had kept them safe. "Time to ride, partner," Bill said, glancing at Roger with a grin. "There are more adventures out there waiting for us." With a final look back at the town, they turned their sights to the horizon, ready for whatever lay ahead, knowing they had faced darkness and emerged victorious side by side.